Okay, from our studios in Los Angeles and Tampa, this is Green Tagged Theme Park in 30. I'm Philip, and I'm joined, as always, by my delightful co-host, Scott Swenson of Scott Swenson Creative Development. On Green Tag, we look at the top news each week and we explain why it matters to business professionals in the themed entertainment and attractions space. And this week, we have another update to cover.
Oh, no, it's Six Flags, isn't it? We've got Six Flags to talk about again. Oh, great. Okay. More Six Flags stuff. Here we go.
And then we're going to get to the Sesame Workshop debacle, which came to us requested multiple times from listeners last week. So thank you for that. But it was announced right after we stopped recording, so we literally just missed it. But we'll get there.
Yeah, I was just saying, okay, bye, Philip. We'll see you. Oh, Sesame's done something. Oh. So
yes,
we'll cover it. Don't panic. We'll cover it today.
We'll cover it. So let's start off. We'll just do a quick update here. This is just the Six Flags thing. I just think it's fascinating at this point where just last week we talked about the brand ambassador and Travis Kelce and all that was going on. And remember that the whole reason that Travis Kelce was brought in is he was brought in with Jana, which is one of the private equity groups, the Jana Partners. They have 9% stake. And so Travis Kelce was wrapped into that. And then he was suggested as the brand ambassador, and they announced this official partnership last week and all these marketing things and everything. And then literally a week later, just a week later, Jana Partners is now pushing Six Flags to explore a sale. And they sent a letter which Reuters got a hold of, apparently. And they sent the letter to the board urging the company to explore a sale and replace the board chair, Marilyn Spiegel. So Spiegel was just named chair in January, so she's only been there for a few months, but she's been a director since 2023. So it's what they said here is it is now in the best interest of shareholders for the company to reverse course and engage with known buyer interest in Six Flags. We have witnessed an alarming pattern of board dysfunction and disjointed decision-making that has become impossible to ignore. So I think we all probably agree with that part, but I think where we probably disagree with is what is best right now. And I think we talked about last week, or that Scott and I have been maintaining for several chapters of the story, is that they do need the time and the space. And we talked about John Reilly and everything he was doing. And we're like, look, there is a ray of hope here where if you could sell enough parks to relieve a little bit of the debt and give yourself runway, and then Reilly can go through and make some of the changes that he's been talking about, and you can right the ship and fix the experiences and bring in all these better food and modernize some of these parks, you could see, hope for the future. But to me, this would derail all of that, because going into a sale and it's crazy. But it is also the playbook, right? So that is kind of the business model of an activist hedge fund, where they buy a stake in a company that they think is undervalued, and they push for changes, and then they just exit. And they don't really want, I don't think that they want to sit here with Six Flags for a decade to kind of watch as they revitalize the brand or not. And it's just interesting timing wise that it came a week after the Kelce announcement. And my only guess on that is that they announced it. It's like the Kelce thing didn't really help the stock as much as they thought it would, I think is the problem, is that they announced a brand partnership. They didn't seem to do much or raise valuation much. And so now they're like, well, we just need to get out. So we're pushing you to sell. What do you think, Scott?
Well, I think it's interesting because they do in their statement say that they still support CEO John Reilly.
Yes.
The target is the board, not the CEO.
Yeah.
So what that suggests to me is there is someone or ones on the board that are holding on to the old ways. And I'm not sure whether Jana really wants them to sell. When you say sale, is that sale of the whole company? Is that sell all of the new Six Flags to XYZ holding company, or is it to sell off additional parks? I think there. If I'm reading between the lines, and this is pure speculation, but if I'm reading between the lines, when they say things like, "We are targeting the board, we want the chair of the board to be replaced, but we still support the CEO," that means that that suggests to me that the holding company, that Jana is looking at it going, the problem is not the way the parks operate. The problem is the board, which is steering them in the wrong directions or dragging their feet so that they can't make the changes quickly enough. Board approval is usually like the kiss of death for new ideas. When you're in a park and you have to go, okay, we have to go through board approval, and that doesn't matter whether you are a huge chain like Six Flags or an independent nonprofit that has a board. It is the board that can put the kibosh on pretty much anything just by saying, no, we don't like it, because the board is the organization that can keep or get rid of pretty much anyone. So everybody thinks that the board is sort of a neutral party, but they're not. They have a great deal of clout in these kinds of organizations, and the larger the organization, the more clout they have. So it sounds to me like there is I won't even say a conflict. There is a perceived conflict between the board and the operations team, and they are not the same thing. And so I find it very interesting that they make a point to say that they still support John, but the target is the board, not the CEO. So that, again, just that little tiny tidbit alone kind of tips their hat. I don't know whether there's the idea of pushing for a sale. I don't know what exactly that means. Yeah. So whether it means we should sell off more parks, or we should sell the whole company, make a quick buck, and get out. I don't know which it is.
Well, I'm not sure that it could be I agree with you entirely. And I'm not sure it could be the sale of the entire thing, because who has the money at this point to buy something with that amount of leveraged debt and all these properties? And it's not going to be Disney. It's not going to be Universal. It's not going to be Herschend. It's not, who is it going to be? It probably would be another private equity or another REIT place and then you're back into the same doom loop, basically, of people who are not willing to make the long-term strategic investment to turn the entire chain around.
Unless it is either Moral or Qiddiya or
yes, that could be
one of those organizations. And I don't know. I can't remember the name of the actual company that owns Six Flags in Qiddiya, or that owns Qiddiya City, but they may be very interested in buying the Six Flags outright. I don't know that for a fact, but they might.
Yeah.
But I think in my own personal opinion, and again, I am not a chairman of a board, nor have I ever been a chairman of a board for a theme park. But in my experience in working on the ground and seeing how the board and the C-suite operates and the people in the trenches operate, I don't think additional sales are a bad idea. I think getting rid of a few extra parks could give them some capital and help them reduce that debt. They're already so far in a hole that if they don't get a few more shovels, they're going to stay there. So no matter how hard they dig. So I'm kind of assuming that may be it. And I think it's more of a threat to get the board to shape up and get behind the project.
Yeah.
But again, this is all conjecture. I can't say that enough. But I usually when an investment firm decides we need to sell, it's pretty much they don't think there's anything salvageable. But the fact that they still support John Reilly and don't support the board, that suggests that they've seen some sort of friction in there that they don't like.
Yeah. Well, like they said, dysfunction. The high level dysfunction, which they said, which I think we did allude to a little bit. Remember when we talked about the first earnings call that John Reilly had, where he had toured all the parks and he was bringing up all these perfectly reasonable observations? I think you and I both were like, the weird thing here is that these are still problems, right? That no one has really, and that could be an indicator again of this dysfunction, like you said, on the board. Like, could just be whatever's happening on the board's preventing them from making decisions, and they're kind of hindering the CEO. And I think you had said, even at that time, the real question is whether or not the board is going to allow the CEO to do what, give him the leeway to do what he needs to do. And maybe
do what they hired him to do.
do what they hired him to do. And maybe this is Jana saying, we don't believe they're going to, so we need to pull the ripcord. But I can't imagine that's going to, I think like you said, the good part here is that if the board is genuinely dysfunctional, like if they're actually dysfunctional, which there's reason to believe they are, then something like changing up the chair and what that would actually help Reilly. But the sale, I don't think would. So I feel like them pushing for a sale or pushing for this aggressive timeline isn't helpful right now. But the board shakeup could be if the board is preventing Reilly from making changes. Is that right?
Well, and the threat of sale, could also be a tool to get the board in line.
Yep, that's right.
Because again, they own 9%. There's still 91% that they would have to, or at least, 41%, 42% that they would have to convince in order to make a sale possible, assuming that you just need a simple majority.
That's right. They, but of course it's not, it's always, like you said, they always have a lot of sway because they're going to the other shareholders, of course, and they're kind of,
right.
They're saying, do you really trust?
And I don't think I don't think it would be the least bit, I don't think this is me just being the conspiracy theory guy, but I'm sure somebody in Jana has already reached out because they've already said there are interested buyers. Well, how would you know that if you hadn't reached out already? Yeah. So there's that.
Yeah, I was wondering that too. And I thought it was just so abrupt that I was wondering if it's something like you said. I had thought about the Middle East, but I wasn't sure about, well, it's all conjecture. But anyway, aside from that, there's the structural problem at Six Flags, which we have all talked about since the merger started, right? The whole structural problem. And I wanted to point to an article from Theme Park Insider, Robert Niles wrote there, which I thought was extraordinary. I mean, I love Robert's work, but I also love how he was able to condense everything into, again, a few simple terms. But I'm going to quote here from his recent article where he says, Six Flags is fundamentally misaligned with the current market, both on the demand and supply sides. It has too many parks in locations that are not experiencing strong economic growth. The attractions that it now offers across its chain are too often designed for a previous generation. They do not meet the needs of the current demographics, nor are Six Flags parks designed for warming and extreme weather. Market leaders, Disney and Universal, have long been aggressive with price increases, positioning themselves as week-long vacation destinations. That leaves an opportunity in the market for a company like Six Flags to reach consumers who feel priced out by Disney and Universal or who are looking for only a day trip rather than a long vacation. But of course, he goes on to say that Six Flags parks are running with one-train operations on their major coasters, leading to long wait times for frustrated visitors. That's not a way to create a positive guest experience and drive the long-term value. Six Flags, they face many challenges, including billions of dollars in debt. The last thing the company needs is a push to deliver more value for shareholders over a period of just a few months. They must invest at the detriment of its short-term ROI in order to correct these misalignments and unlock long-term potential.
That's assuming that the goal of the investors is the success of the parks.
That's right.
That's exactly not right. The case. Which is not always the case. It may be the case, I don't know, but that's not always the case. Quite often the case is, I see a chance for me to get in, make a quick buck, and get out.
That's right.
I'm going to buy this. I quite honestly, I understand that completely. I've done that when I buy pieces of art. I know that this is something that's going to be really popular, so I'm going to work my butt off to get a copy of it. When it first comes out, it's a limited edition thing. It'll be gone. Once it's gone, I know I can double the price, and I can do that overnight. So I understand that mentality. I think, though, that everything, and I also want to make it very clear, I am not disagreeing with Robert at all. I agree 100%. I think it's very important to recognize that and all of this stuff is the stuff that we've said. Yep. My favorite comment is the one train operation. This yep. is, that once any park goes down to the bare minimum it takes to keep the ride open, that they are hurting and they don't have a plan. They don't have a solution.
Yep, that's right.
And Six Flags is not the only park we're seeing that in either. So, this kind of goes back to the mega parks, unless they're tied to a giant brand, the big theme park, the destination theme parks are going by the wayside unless they're either Disney or Universal at this point.
Yeah.
And because they're tied to iconic IPs that are, and they have the money or have invested the money to make them so incredibly bold and robust. I have always said and I used to say this about Paramount Parks and all the other chains, if they were able to use their numbers of parks, to use the clout of having buying power to create the best local theme park they could, to me, that seems to be the approach. Don't try to make it a destination park. Be the park that families want to go to because it's that local park. Because look what happens the moment they go to close any of the Six Flags or which are now, some of the former Cedar Fair parks as well. The moment they go to close them, it's like, oh no, I grew up there. That's we can't, blah, 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 blah. So lean into that.
Yeah.
Lean into that. Don't try to homogenize everything so that it's going to be one giant Six Flags monster that has 1,500 legs in different locations all around the country. Make it so that each park can be unique in its own way that follows what the local market wants. And that way, when people go to visit these places, I mean, I know so many theme park nerds that love to visit places just to go and ride a coaster because it's been there since, the 20s. It boggles my mind that everyone tries to compete in the same way. When Busch Gardens in Tampa says, we're going to do this because Universal did this, and Universal used to say, we're going to do this because Disney did this, and now Six Flags is going to say, we're going to do this because Universal and Disney and Busch Gardens have done this. That's ridiculous. There's the people who've been doing it for a while not only have a leg up from a timing standpoint, from a research standpoint, but also from a financial standpoint. So recognize that you can use best practices to create unique experiences around the country.
I agree with all that. I think it also dovetails. I don't think that's in conflict with what Robert is saying at all. And I think it's more a question of some of this, like you were alluding to, some of the, the one train operations is one symptom of it, of the cost cutting and whatnot. But I think a lot of it's how do you, like, I guess, Scott, from like operations perspective, like how, I think that's a pretty big shift that would need to happen at some of these locations to make them, to kind of turn them from where they're at now, which is kind of a bad guest experience and bad creature comforts, which we always talk about. The creature, and then we hear that all the time. Creature comforts are bad, lines are long, no place, blah 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 blah, on and on and on, food, etc.
So corporate needs to do a corporate-wide investment of, here is X amount of dollars. Here's how we're going to allocate the money. Here's X amount of dollars for you to put benches in your park that are shaded with water available.
And then the staffing, all that kind of stuff, like making that it's
you can't do everything at once. You can't do everything at once. You have to make it so that, and this is why I was so excited to hear that John had gone out and visited all the parks. I talk about John like I know, like we're best buddies. We're not. I worked with him for a couple of years. I don't mean to be that name dropper guy, but I will be honest. If I ran into him at IAPA, I'd walk up to him and go, "Congratulations, John! I hear you're doing really well for yourself."
Yeah.
He would go, "And who are you?" But anyway,
he's that guy that talks about me on YouTube.
On YouTube, yeah, he talks way too much about me on YouTube. But he always talks nice about me, so that's the good thing. But I loved it when John Reilly said, "I'm going to all the parks. I'm going to listen to what the frontline people have to say." That seems to me to be in line with what I'm saying, and I agree. What I'm saying is not in conflict with Robert's observations in the article. I'm saying is, if you are truly interested in trying to make the parks better and make them succeed and not just get a quick buck, this is the approach that I would recommend taking.
But of course, Jana just wants a quick buck, which we've known since
we're going to assume that.
Yeah, but that's been their systemic problem. I think that's always a systemic problem when you have this type of investment in the parks. Is it's not necessarily aligned with the best long-term strategy. They want returns faster, which isn't necessarily possible when you have to embark on this turnaround strategy over time. One thing I wanted to mention really quick, I know we're running time on this one, but I did go to Knott's recently, which I haven't gone in quite a long time. And I went for their Boysenberry Festival. And I think everything that you mentioned, I think I noticed. And everything even that Robert mentioned. And I mean, not in the bad way, actually the good way. So the good staff interactions that I had were the ones that were older, that were senior employees or older, much older employees who had been there for a long time, and they were patient and nice, and they made small talk, and those were all great. There was still, college people sprinkled around, but everybody had a good culture. They had a good Knott's culture. They had a good attitude. You had I interviewed a lot of people. I'm writing an article about the experience, but I interviewed a lot of the other guests that were there, and everything you're saying is exactly what I heard time and time again from the guests that were there. They said that this is close to them. It's cheaper than Disney. It feels like going to a park. It just feels like they have a pass. They like to show up. They like to eat and hang out and eat the food. The local vendors that they bring in for the Boysenberry Festival, I talked to them as well. They're all local artists and local craftsmen, and they love being able to go to Knott's and make something, sell crafts. I ran into a woman even who had sewn a Boysenberry themed dress to wear to Knott's to come to the festival. So that basically the way I would describe it is the Boysenberry Festival feels like a small town festival put on by a small town. It just happens to be in a theme park.
Yep. And, because we have fewer and fewer of these communal gathering spaces, it is an opportunity for these parks to become those.
That's right. And I think that is the opportunity. If you could do that at every park that Six Flags has, that's the strategy. Okay, anyway, we got to move on. Okay, sorry. Okay, let's try and wrap this last one up here. Sesame Workshop is suing United Parks to terminate the licensing agreement. So basically, here's what happened. Sesame Workshop filed a federal lawsuit in the Southern District of New York on March 12th against SeaWorld, and they are saying they're asking the court to terminate the licensing agreement, not just to pay the damages. So currently, the licensing agreement runs through December 2031. The relationship itself is over 45 years old. And United Parks' argument, so Sesame is arguing that they stopped paying in September, and before that, they had taken a long time and had gone over previous payments that they were doing. And so they're currently not paying. This is what they're currently not paying. And so they're asking to terminate the agreement, not just because they're currently not paying, but because of how late they were on previous payments. United Parks, their argument is that because Sesame Workshop's distribution deal with Warner Brothers to release new episodes on HBO Max wasn't renewed, that Sesame failed to invest in its brand and exposure and reputation had weakened, and that gave United Parks cause to terminate. Okay. But just just to clarify though, that Sesame Parks is still operating that United Parks is still operating the Sesame-branded parks and attractions, like right now. Like Sesame Place San Diego is going to open on March 27th, and they're not paying for the license. So like they're opening lands that they're not paying a license fee for. So that's the thing. They stopped paying in September. So I put a whole timeline here, for reference, but previously, in 2024, a federal judge in Orlando had upheld the arbitration ruling ordering United Parks to pay $11.4 million, including interest, and they didn't pay until just this last October. So they took a year after that was done. So I don't know, and this all comes. We reported just recently on their latest earnings call, right? And remember, we talked about the CEO where he was pushed about the expenses and how he was going to curb them and how he'd been over last time and blah, blah, blah. And he kind of gave a dodgy answer and all this. And well, yeah, I mean, one way to curb your expenses is to not pay licensing deals that you apparently have to pay as ordered by a court, I guess. What? So the Sesame Workshop statement here is that United Parks and Resorts has repeatedly failed to honor its contractual obligations, leaving Sesame Workshop no choice but to pursue litigation to protect our brand and trust the families in it. And United Parks just said that they're looking forward to setting the record straight in court, which I'm not sure how else you can set it, because anyway, to me, okay, this is not a financial show. I'm not an attorney, so there's my disclosure. But I kind of don't see, it seems like United Parks is trying to just delay this because they're trying to do, like we talked about, some sort of, we talked about this buybacks they did. We've talked about all their weird financial machinations and them trying to increase the share or decrease the share dilution before they potentially sell land. So I feel like they're just trying to punt this down so they can put more money to that plan, so they can sell land and get some sort of return on it. And maybe then they'll pay it. But I don't, like, I'm not an attorney, but I don't see how this is not illegal. Like, they're opening a land for which they are supposed to be paying IP and they're not paying it. And maybe there's something in that contract that says that Sesame is required to invest periodically. Maybe that's in there, sure. But okay. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I was going to say. Neither of us have seen the contract. Neither of us have seen the agreement. And if it does say that, over the next X number of years, because Sesame, with public television, Sesame was dying. It was going away. And so unless if there was something in that agreement that says Sesame agrees to invest X amount of dollars or time or whatever in the ongoing distribution of the Sesame Street material and spreading of the Sesame Street brand, that may be something that United Parks could go, excuse me, you haven't quite lived up to your end of the bargain. That said, it is still not an excuse to just not pay.
That's right.
It is one of those things that if that is indeed the case, then make it clear, we are filing suit against you, Sesame, for not living up to your end of the bargain, assuming that was part of the original agreement, assuming that was part of the original deal, which it would not be uncommon to have that sort of clause in there to say, because there are those IP holders who are just like, yeah, I own the rights to this, but I don't really give a crap whether anybody really sees it or not. I just want somebody to buy it and put it in their parks. Okay, great. Then the parks invest a ton of money, because the investment that all of the United Parks have made, not just in the SeaWorld, or not just in the Sesame specific locations, but in all of the SeaWorld parks and the Busch Gardens parks, is substantial. There's a hard goods capital investment there. And so if Sesame were to all of a sudden say, here's a cease and desist, or get a judge to say, here's a cease and desist, you can't operate anything that has any of our logos, characters, names, etc., that would affect every single park in the United Parks chain. So this could be a big deal. I mean, this could be a really big deal. I don't know whether it is. I know, Philip, you see it as a little bit more cut and dried than I do. I don't think it's right, but I don't think it's as cleanly right and wrong as we see it as, because we don't know what the original agreement was.
I agree with that. I think, to me, there's almost two different issues here. Maybe three different issues.
Agreed.
Yeah, like, one is we don't know what the contract is, so we don't actually know if Sesame Workshop is fulfilling their end or not. We don't know that. But what we do know is that a judge ordered them to pay $11.4 million within a timeline, and they ignored that. And there's
what was
also
what was the original timeline? What was the original timeline the judge ordered?
They were supposed to pay within, I think, 30 days, and they took a year.
Okay. Did they file for any extensions?
No, apparently not. And they had to pay late for it. And then they also had to pay a settlement to the city of San Diego, right? And now they've stopped paying royalties altogether. So I just feel like that's a little bit separate thing, where, like, they have a pattern now, an established pattern. So I just think that weakens their case. If they go in, they have an established pattern of ignoring
I agree.
payments. But then the third thing, to your point, is, like, what does this mean for the chain as a whole? Because some of these places, again, I think the Sesame thing is what makes it a family-friendly offering, and the whole Sesame Place areas like Philadelphia and San Diego, those are big chunks of it. It's not just merchandise. I guess in some of these areas, it's
in the
there's
Sesame
whole
Place,
chunks.
in the Sesame Place parks, the whole park is a Sesame theme. That's a given.
Exactly. So that's a big deal.
But
To me,
to
I
say,
think that's a big deal.
that's a big deal. But to also say, though, that in the individual parks, that if they got rid of the Sesame brand, they wouldn't be kid friendly. Well, they were we had what is now the Sesame area at Busch Gardens, Tampa, has always been the kid friendly area. It was when I
So it's
first
just
started working there,
theming.
it was called Dwarf Village, the culturally insensitive children's play area, and then it went to Land of the Dragons, which was also not IP supported, and then it went to Sesame. So they have the ability to keep it family friendly, but they've invested so much in putting capital investment behind the Sesame IP that it could be really catastrophic for them. I think it's plain and simple that they are playing the shell game with their budget and moving money from here to there and paying what they can when they can. But,
that's right.
And I think using the claim that Sesame is no longer a viable IP, I don't think that's a reason to just stop paying. I think that is a reason to countersue. So
that's right. Renegotiate.
We'll see. Renegotiate, and we'll see how that all pans out in the end. Speaking of the end, we are there. So, guys, thank you so much once again for watching and listening to us yammer. And I think we talked about some pretty important stuff, and hopefully you got some takeaways. Again, thank you for listening. On behalf of Philip and myself, this is Green Tag Theme Park in 30, and we will see you next week.